Hello, everyone, and welcome to the OnPoint podcast. For those that I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Scott Thompson, and today I am so excited to have Brant Jarrett, field medical lead for Mallinckrodt, and the FOG, Focus Area Working Group lead for the Medical Affairs Professional Society on insight generation. And today we are not going to hit the basics of insight generation. We are going to hit some of the toughest questions out there about insights. Stay with us. We cover everything from why insight programs are so hard to lead, what are the biggest challenges that we have to overcome, what does a great program look like, and even get into AI and some of the new technology. Join us for this amazing conversation. Welcome to OnPoint.
Welcome to OnPoint, the medical excellence podcast where we talk to pharma leaders about how to build highly effective medical affairs organizations.
Brent, I am so excited for this conversation. Welcome to the OnPoint podcast.
Thank you, Scott. It's nice meeting you and being back together with you again.
Oh my gosh, it has been too long. I love catching up with you when we're at conferences, but recently we've had more one-on-one conversations and I really miss it.
Yeah, I always love the conversations and picking your brain and just see how things are going. And I think that's my favorite part.
Very good. Well, so here's the thing. For everybody listening, this is going to not be your traditional insight generation episode. See, there's so much insight generation content out there. Everybody's kind of covering the basics. Everybody's focusing on technology stuff. What we're going to do is we're going to hit some of the hard-hitting questions that teams who are trying to really make a noticeable improvement in their insight program are asking and that they're facing. And so Brent and I took a look at what are some of the hardest questions to answer about insight generation. And we're going to tackle them today. And it'll be a great discussion, a great debate. And anybody who's listening who'd like to add to the chat at the end, we'll be watching for it because these aren't easy questions, right, Brent?
No, definitely not. I was just telling Scott earlier, I had to actually write some things down and think about my answers. Typically, I just, shoot from the hip and say whatever comes to my mind. But these are some good questions I really wanted to think about.
Well, Brant, just in terms of introduction, I already shared in the intro kind of your background as head of field medical at Mallinckrodt and also your role as the insight lead for the Insight FOG for the Medical Affairs Professional Society. And so that's awesome. Why are you spending so much time on insight generation? Just to give us a little intro about why insight generation is an important topic to you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Coming from the field medical perspective, it's really important and it's a big part of what field medical does and should be doing. It really is the currency. I think it's the best way for us to show value. One of my friends many years ago that I worked with, when talking about the MSLs, she said, I called the MSLs the Navy SEAL MSLs. They get the job done. One knows who did it or, what exactly happened. No, something worked out. But that's really what field medical does, right? You go in, you get the work done. But it's really hard to show, hey, because the MSLs were here, the MSLs did this, here's all the things that come out of it. And I think insights is one of the best ways to do that. And it is one of the best ways to provide value to the company. And it's complex. It's not easy. It's not simple. So I like that aspect of it too. And it's something that's always evolving. Post-COVID, virtual engagement and everything with AI and social media. There's just so many things changing about it. It's fascinating and it's fun and valuable. So I get excited about it.
Love it. Well, you have certainly spent a lot of time, not just on your own team and your own work around insights, but really elevating the conversation about insights through MAPS. And we'll share a little bit more about that later on in the episode.
Thank you. It's fun. And MAPS has been a great organization. I really like the volunteer aspect of it. A lot of people are coming volunteering. You got to learn from everybody. You get to share what you're doing and learn from what everyone else is doing. I feel like it really helps me stay on the cutting edge, staying on top of everything, especially in a field like insights that is evolving so much. It's great hearing from small pharma, mid-sized pharma, large pharma, Europe, US, South America, Asia, just get a little bit of everything. So it's been really fun.
I absolutely agree. It's such a great organization to be part of. Looking forward to us both being at their upcoming conference next year. I think there's some great sessions. If you're not familiar with MAPS, we'll put it in the show notes and make sure you come see Brant and I in New Orleans. It's coming up. It is going to be a lot of fun. All right. So let's jump in. So just to get us started, when I went to the Medical Affairs Professional Society portal and logged in and searched for insights, there were over 100 resources in that library about insight generation. So, given that this is such an important topic and that there's so much content about it, why does it seem that so many teams are still struggling to get a highly meaningful, highly impactful insights program off the ground?
Yeah, we're just getting into it. Not the easy questions first. Um, yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of content. We've even gone in there. Lucy Williams and others have gone in and cleaned it up and tried to see what's so relevant changing because it changes a lot. But there's a number of things I think. First of all, insights is very complex and complicated, right? It's not a one person or one process task. It requires different people, different processes across this whole continuum of the insight process. We could spend a whole hour just talking about that one question, right? But a couple of the things I just wanted to mention. So the strategic planning of insight, you have to think about what questions are being asked and who are those questions being asked to and by who. So just right there, what question, who's asking those questions and who are we asking those questions to? And I think that that's an area that doesn't get enough focus sometimes. We just, hey, SLs or whoever, go out, ask questions. I don't even know what questions. You just go out and engage, go meet with them, come back, and we'll see what you bring back. So I think that's part of it. And then another, I think, subset of that is the whole multi-channel aspect. Traditionally, it's just field medical that brings these insights back. They ask these questions. What about the medical director, HR, med-info, clinical, intelligence, PD, right? You'd be getting observations for all these other functions that can help generate the insights that provide value. Right? So that's just a part of that. And then you have the omnichannel approach, which is new, a new way of thinking, taking that sort of flipping it upside down, focusing on the HCPs, and what are we learning about the HCPs through these insights. So that's just one piece. Another piece is training, training and retraining those who are gathering the observations to lead to the insight. It takes a lot of training, and it definitely takes retraining. Again, I think the aspect that gets overlooked a lot is training and retraining of field medical or whoever else is involved. And a challenge with that is you have people coming and going, right? So you have new people that, and let's say you have new MSLs come in. Oh, they've already been MSLs. They know how to do it. But it's different at every company, right? So you have to focus on training and retraining. Then the gathering aspect. How are you collecting the observation? How are you storing them, right? What process, what data management tools are you using to collect and store the insight? Then you have the analyzing. How are you analyzing it? Who's analyzing it? And then a big one that I'm very passionate about as well is the reporting. You put all this time and effort into gathering the observations, determining what's an insight, and then analyzing it. And how do you report it? You just put together a PowerPoint and shoot it off in an email and say, hopefully people read this email. Hopefully people like it. Or are you actually bringing people together, having a discussion, talking about, hey, are these observations, are they even insight? Is there something actionable here? Is there something that we need to do or commercial needs to do with this information? So that's important. And then the assigning action, follow up, and showing value. From all the people I talk to, that just doesn't happen. You don't have that assigning action. Who's going to do something about this? Who's going to follow up on it? And then what is the value? And how do we show that value? Again, things happen, right? We see good things happening. And typically if it's field medical bringing those insights, they're not getting the credit, right? It's not being assigned to them or saying, hey, this happened because field medical. And I think as leaders, we have to do a much better job highlighting and showing and re-showing these actionable insights and the value that they're bringing to the company. That's a lot. There's a lot there.
There's a lot in the way of why this is so complex, and there's two things that you said that jump out to me there. And they both have to do with a foundational mindset, right? Like it's easy to change an individual behavior. It's easy to implement a single tool. It's easy to call a specific meeting, right, to do something. But two things you said have to do with this mindset that insights should be a directed activity versus a reactive activity, right? And you had said, kind of traditionally when I see a lot of teams start, their direction is go listen for important things and share it. That's it, right? And they go, and what one MSL thinks is important might not be important to the person in the home office having to make a strategic investment.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And it's interesting, Scott, because I presented at the MAPS European game a year and a half ago, and it was really interesting. Tony and I asked the question, how many of you, in the room, how many of you even have someone that's over the insights process at your company? Half the people didn't even have someone who's over insight, right? So that's a problem. You're trying to fix this process. You're trying to work on this process. You're just going to keep recreating the wheel, just keep spinning and spinning if you don't even have someone who is taking ownership of this process. I think that's a challenge.
That's amazing. And did you also ask the question, hopefully before that question, is insights important in your organization?
Yeah. And everyone said, oh yeah, absolutely. Insights is important. That's why we're sitting here. That's why we came to this session.
Yeah.
Insights is extremely important. We want to do better. We want to improve our process. Leadership wants us to improve the process, but then half the people didn't even have someone responsible or over insights. So it was a huge learning for us, and some of the things, takeaways that, okay, sometimes we got to just start way back at the very beginning, right? All this other stuff doesn't matter if you don't have someone that's in charge of it and taking ownership of it.
Yeah. Well, that is a deep hitting lesson right there. And for those of you who are listening who didn't see our previous session on the role of the insight lead, we actually did a webinar specifically for insight leads, teaching kind of the 3 things that insight lead must do to be effective, whether you're doing it part-time as a stretch assignment as a senior MSL, or you're the field lead, or if you are a dedicated leader specifically for insights. So we'll make sure we include that in the notes, because I think you're right, Brent. If this is one of the top 2 or 3 things of most importance in medical affairs, you need a leader for it. I mean, we talk about content and presenting science. You have a head of content. You have somebody in Psychom whose entire job is the creation of that. If this is as important, why isn't somebody in charge?
Yeah, absolutely. And then another thing that I was thinking about when you asked this question is, again, as part of MAPS, working with a lot of different people, a lot of different organizations, everyone's challenge is different, right? So everybody has a very unique challenge that is specific to them. And so you can try to create content, or you can have a discussion a little bit more broad, but everyone's challenge is very unique. And so it's important is each organization to understand that too, and not just think, oh, hey, whatever worked for one company, or if you have information for one company, I'm sure it'll work for us to a certain extent. Yeah, especially in the beginning. But you have to realize, hey, we probably do have some unique challenges, and we might need specific help. We might need to reach out to a vendor, or to, someone specific at MAPS, or whatever it is, someone that has experience to help us with our unique challenge. And I think that's really important too.
Wonderful. Well, you also brought up training. And so you probably sat in as many insights workshops as I have. And they all kind of start the same with, what is an insight? Okay. Do we need to still start there? Like, do we not know what an insight is yet? Well, we're only 20 some odd years into this.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I am surprised how many times this comes up still. I hope that we're starting to get over that. We're starting to get past that. I think one of the challenges is we just don't have common terminology. Again, from one company to the next, from one person to the next, even something as simple as a thought leader, right? Is it a KOL? Is it a FKOL? Is it a TL? There's so many different terminology just for what this HCP means or is to our company. And then with insights, you have observations, you have insight, actionable insight, potentially actionable insight, data point. And I think we have to do a better job on coming together on what are some of those pre-insight definitions. And I think that's where we really struggle. We might call it an observation or data point and insight when we really mean all this other stuff leading to an insight. I think we just have to do a better job coming together. The insight part, we're over that hump for the most part.
Yeah.
Gotta work on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's more about identifying what an insight isn't than continuing to harp on that an insight is a new piece of knowledge or a confirmation that allows you to feel more confident in the decision you're going to make, right? Like that pretty straightforward across industries. Now, to your point, do we expect an MSL? I hear this all the time. MSLs, I want you to submit insights. I want you to only submit something that is going to revolutionize and you write out paragraphs assessing how we're going to implement it. And that's just not reality. Right? The reality is we need a lot of data points in order to feel confident in a decision we're going to make. So give us the data so that the insight can be created.
Yeah, absolutely. And I again, it goes to training, right? You have to train your team on what you actually want them to do. If you're not training and retraining, then you have to continue to do that. And then it takes a lot of time. And even if using AI, you have to clean up a lot of information that shouldn't be there. I think the other piece that's really important to that is, are you using your key insight topics, key insight questions? Are you just trying to get organic information? And I think the more that we focus on generating key insight topics and key insight questions will absolutely help us get the insights that we want, right? And take some of those data points and those observations and turn them into insights that are valuable. But again, that takes pre-planning. That takes collaboration with the other leaders, other group. What is it exactly that we build meta for others to go get? Don't just say, hey, go get information and bring back everything, but it needs to be specific, targeted, detailed. What exactly do you want them to? And I think that's so valuable because you bring back all these observations. What does it really mean? And if it's coming from one person, is that better than if it came from a different person or one person says it? Do 100 people agree or 100 people disagree? When you have the key insight topics and key insight questions, you can quantify it, right? You can say, we asked 500 HCPs this question. Here's what they said. And it's just so much easier to do that. It just takes time and effort in the beginning.
Brent, you know, I'm a big fan of first insight generation being a team sport, right? That you need to have strategists at home office and field working together to prioritize. And then second, writing key insight questions, deploying those out, being structured in how we collect a lot of that data. But I do want to I hear a lot of people say that is restricting to MSLs, that it puts blinders on and that they're not bringing back, quote, the real insights that I like to store in a spreadsheet somewhere because I'm answering these questions, but I keep my real insights over here. What do you say to that, to the people? Have you heard that before?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely have.
What do you say to them?
That's a good question. So I think, again, we have to take a step back and we have to be collaborative. Field medical can't do it on their own. We won't be successful if field medical does it on their own. And vice versa. If we just have someone sitting in a home office dictating everything, or just a medical director dictating everything, they won't be successful either. So we have to collaborate with everyone that's going to be involved and make sure we're on the same page. And again, this includes the medical directors, medical information, HUR, clinical development operation, even commercial. How do we know what information we need to be getting if we don't know what the company wants and what the company is going to need? And then at the same time, we do want them to have those discussions and bring back organic information. There are the rare instances that one piece of information is revolutionary. It is something that changes. You could have an MSL find out that someone's selling a business that they have, and you bring that back and the company's like, we never even heard about that. We want to buy that product. And that can be revolutionary. Or one person is working with a lot of hospitals and tells you something like, you know what, we need to create a handout. We need to create a leave behind for the nurses. Or, yeah, you know what, we actually haven't ever worked with the community intensivists. Why did we not do that? We need to do that. But typically it comes in from a lot of people instead of just one. Yeah, you have to collaborate. Definitely have to collaborate.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that as the responsibility for insights is growing, right? It started off really as this field medical owned process, and we are going to present you these things that we found. Now it is becoming the medical affairs insights engine, where everybody needs to get involved in making sure we know the priorities and make them as specific as possible, and then deploy around that. And I think what we find is that when the team spends enough time thinking about what we might hear in response to these key insight questions, it's not unlimited possibilities, right? So it's helpful to put a few multiple choice answers in to get, here's what somebody believes, but then still use the free text, use the unstructured to capture why, because the why will be all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's really what you can do something about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we don't really understand or appreciate this is a continuous process, right? I think we want it to be, okay, here's the start point, here's the stop point, and then we have our insights and we're good to go. Let's move forward. But a lot of times it really is a continuous process. You're bringing in information. Some of it turns into insights. Some of it, you need to wait and see if anything else comes up, maybe at a conference or in other conversations. Or you look at that, you're like, you know what? we need to now go out and ask a couple questions around this to understand this better. And you have to be able to continue that process and modify and change, or it's really not going to be that effective if it's just this, okay, put something in, get something out, we're done. Let's go to the next round, right? You have to have this continual process.
So you had talked about training, and I know we got to partner a little bit last week on a new round of training for a very experienced MSL team. Right, this isn't their
Yeah.
first rodeo. What were some of the big ahas? What were the things where your team went, that's a good reminder, or I hadn't thought about it this way? For an experienced team, where would you focus? What resonated?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Honestly, I think some of it is just talking to each other, right? Just getting everyone together and talking to each other. And we've put in all these observations and information, but how often do they actually get to talk to each other about the information that they're gathering? Right? It just goes into the system, and then someone else looks at it and assesses and analyzes it, and they're not able to really hear from each other what's going on, unless you have a discussion towards the end, which we try to do. And I'll talk about that later, but I think that's really important. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. Just, oh, you know what? I don't always hear this from this person. Right? I didn't realize you guys are experiencing the same things that we are. And even just training, again, you think that, okay, they got it, they know it. And even some of the comments like, you know what, this is really good, just to go back to the basics sometimes. And I think one other thing that I hear is I get into the weeds, or I get in a rut. I'm meeting the same people. I'm talking about the same thing. It's hard for me to take a step back and realize, you know what, some of this stuff is actually really important for the company to know. I just hear it all the time, so I didn't even think of recording it or reporting it. But as managers, when you do field rides, when you go with them, a lot of times you hear it maybe for the first time, or you're like, oh, hey, how come you didn't put that in? I remember them saying that. And like, oh, I hear that all the time. I just didn't think about it. A couple of different things.
When I think about the trainings that we've been able to provide this year, one of the things that jumps out at me is what I've been calling the paradox of practice, right? Which is those that appear to need the practice the least are those that have practiced the most, right? How many free throws did Michael Jordan throw compared to a million more, right? Though he appears to be the one who needs to practice the least. And so I
Yeah.
love that you're talking about training and retraining and really practicing. And one of the things that I suggest to everybody around this training is, once the foundations are in place, not always looking for new frameworks, new things to bring in, but instead practice. And for me, like, the best practice for an MSL is to say, hey, here's an insight that we brought in, right? And it could be a good insight. And we ask the question, what's one more question you could have asked that physician to go from good?
Yes.
Right? Or it might be a lousy insight. Hey, what could have made this valuable? What one question could you have asked? And just doing that every week even has been revolutionary.
Yeah, we've seen that. For us, including the MSLs in some of the discussion, it's helped that, because then they get asked that follow-up question. And at first, like, oh yeah, I should have asked that. Oh, I didn't ask that. Oh, that wasn't part of our key insight topics or questions. But taking that through and thinking about, okay, well, that was good. Now, what else could I ask around that?
Yeah.
I think that's great. And then I think one other thing that I didn't mention that was really helpful in the training is the HCP alignment, or the sentiment. We did that in the past after we worked with you guys, and then got away from that. But I think that's really helpful, and I'm excited to get back to doing that too. Right, that HCP alignment around different topics or different questions is going to be really, really helpful and beneficial. So that was really helpful in the training.
Yeah. For me, I'm finding that, if we start with the belief that medical affairs is here for the purpose of changing clinical practice in order to have an outcome on patient lives, the way we do it is by presenting science, presenting evidence, presenting data that changes belief that lead to those behaviors. And so if we can measure people's belief against our scientific narrative, we know if we're making progress, and if not, why. Right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And sometimes, for people that's scary, because now all of a sudden they can hold me, they can hold me to something like, oh wait, if none of my HCPs are making progress, is that my fault? Is it, the company's fault? But I think it's really important to be able to look at that and be more strategic.
Yeah.
But I think it's fantastic. I'm excited.
I'm really excited. For anybody who is listening, it is critical to make sure that you don't set goals like all of your KOLs need to be fully aligned by October. Because one, it's not their role to do that. And two, they magically will, but it won't be accurate. Right. And so we need accurate measurement because it's not an MSL's job to fool, trick, manipulate, push, pressure an HCP to believe something. It's to present the evidence and find out why they believe it or not so that the whole system can know what else we can do better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whatever you tell the MSLs, hey, I need you to do this, they'll go do it. You got to be careful. That's a good point.
So um, let's jump into a very popular topic right now. And that is, and you brought up the whole analysis and reporting piece of it. Reporting analysis is revolutionized over the last year because of this next generation of AI, right? AI has been around for a long time, but this particular iteration of AI with natural language processing, two-way dialogue through GPT style interaction is really changing the game. How do you see AI influencing how we gather and analyze insights?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we could have a whole hour discussion just on AI. And we actually, so for Maps, we do a webinar every other month, and we just did one on AI a couple months ago. And if you wouldn't mind sharing that link as part of the podcast, there's an article. You can go look at the article, and then you can listen to the recording of the podcast. Some really good panelists and a great presenter on there that very experienced in AI. But I think overall, AI really allows us to do more with less and to be more efficient and confident in our insight. And five specific things. One, the enhanced strategic alignment of medical strategies through the comprehensive analysis of insight. We're able to analyze a lot more, look at it a little bit better, a little bit differently. So really can focus more on the alignment of medical strategies. Now, another one is improved efficiency. So reducing the admin hours by analyzing data, looking at the data. And obviously the bigger your team or the more people you have, that increases exponentially. So you definitely have to have AI to be able to reduce that. Another one is assessing the sentiment like we talked about, and also the trend analysis. It's really difficult to look at trend analysis without AI, right? A human putting together thousands of words. How do you do that? Right. So it really helps us with trend analysis. Improving the presentation of results, have much better presentations, right? And at the end of the day, I mean, you have to show what your insights are doing, what they are, the value of the insight. So you want to have a really good, well-organized, aesthetic presentation. So AI can definitely help with that. And then one I don't think we talk about a lot is it removes the human biases that can occur through the data analysis, right? As humans, again, we might say, oh, well, this HCP, I really like this one. And, he or she is really, really good. What they say is way more valuable than someone else. Or the prophecy fallacy, right? Well, yeah, this is what I expected to see. So of course, this is what we should move forward with. And AI removes that. And I think sometimes it creates challenges. You don't get the results that you were looking for or hoping for. But at the end of the day, that's what you want. You want that unbiased analysis. I think those are some of the ways that AI helps.
Yeah, I've been so thrilled with the implementations of AI that we've done. Two maybe quick examples on some things you said. So one is that most of the time when people are doing analyses, and I've read hundreds and hundreds of insight reports this year that were done pre-AI, and everybody tells you like, here's the summary of what we heard, right? But sometimes the best insight is in the differences of what we heard. Right? We're hearing this from dermatologists and this from allergists. We're hearing this in the US and something different in the UK. We're seeing something different if they've been in practice for more than 10 years versus newbies. Like if you just analyze in a way that smashes that together into an average, that you're missing out on such rich insight,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest cautionary tales, I think, is in that garbage in, garbage out, right? If you can't just say, okay, hey, AI, you go figure everything out. Do what we want you to do. Read my mind. You have to put the time and effort in the beginning and say, okay, what exactly is it that we want to analyze? How do we want to analyze? What are we putting in? And I think that can be challenging because people will say, okay, we got this amazing platform. It should work. You run it. It's like, oh, the platform's crap. That system's horrible. It didn't give us what we needed. You still have to make sure that you tell AI what you want it to do, right? Put it in the system that way. So something that I don't think necessarily gets talked about or implemented as well as it should.
Yeah. And the whole thing of, data, good quality in, quality out, junk in, junk out. I think that something we've already covered around being clear on the key insight questions, having more structure on the what and then pretext on the why really help with that. And then one of the biggest innovations that we've done this year that is just really helping with this is actually moving AI earlier in the process before the data is ever submitted to help those that are trying to write insights, write them better to say, hey, what you just wrote is not insightful, right? Or what you just wrote is convoluted. Is this a simpler way of saying that? Or what you wrote isn't compliant. We can't use it, right? So what I'm really loving about kind of our Quello team is that they moved it up front to make the data that we have access to better.
Yeah. And the end result is much better. Again, especially with all the time and effort and money that you put into this whole process. If the end result isn't there, you wasted everything.
All right. So speaking of waste, here it is. This is the hardest part. If you have 30 MSLs on a team, let's say, all in costs is somewhere between $7 and $12 million for that team, depending on the company. If we say that there's a couple of things that are the most important things they do, let's say half of that is $3.5 million in expense. How can you evaluate if the insights that we're bringing in was worth $3 million?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think in most cases, it is difficult to put an exact monetary amount on it. But it's really important and possible to show what the results of the insights are. And some of those you can put monetary value in. You'll have people on the commercial side that do that all day long, and they'll analyze and assess and figure it out. But I think that it's a huge piece that's missing in most companies that I talk to. Medical affairs or field medical, they're not getting credit for the results of their insight, and people don't even know necessarily what those results are. So I think we absolutely have to do a better job to follow up on the insights process. Whatever it is you're doing, however you're sending them out, the discussion that's having, make sure that you follow up and say, okay, 3 months later, 6 months later, which is typically when you actually see the results of those insights, right? You have to follow up and say, hey, what ended up happening with this? Oh, okay, you have a leave behind that you created. How many people have you given that to? What are they doing? How many patients have seen that? How many clinicians are using that? Right. And it takes extra work, but you have to do that. Then you bring that back to the company and say, hey, this leave behind that we created because the HCPs told us we should, it's in 500 hospitals now. We've had 5,000 HCPs that have seen this, have used it. 10,000 patients have it in their hands now. That's what we have to be able to show. And it just doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I agree. That whole insights to action meeting at the end is usually done by email, right? McKinsey released a report last year that said less than 1%, which whenever you see the word less than 1%, they just want to be kind. They didn't want to say zero, right? Less than 1% of what was submitted by the field is even read by the organization.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's something, Scott. So that's something I'm very, very passionate about is just that end part, that follow through, that discussion. So to me, I don't like sending the results out in an email. No one's going to read it. And look, I mean, I'll confess right now, when people send me conference reports, some of them I read, some of them I don't, right? When people send me long decks, I might glance and be like, okay, I'll look at this later. It's not urgent right now. I'll take a look at it later. And you just don't. And I think a big piece that's missing is even if those do get read, what is the discussion? For me, the most valuable part about the whole insights process in presenting it is the discussion that's had. So what we do is we'll have what we call a FIR meeting, a field insight review meeting, try to have monthly, bi-monthly, and you bring everyone together. All of the key stakeholders from the different functions will come on. We present the insights and we call them potentially actionable. I don't even know if these are actionable or not until someone says, I'll take ownership of that. You know what? That's extremely helpful to us. But then you have those follow-up questions. Well, what do you think about this? Did anyone say this? you know what, this is really important. And you start to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and then someone takes action on it. And then you can actually do something with it. And then you follow up. And the other piece that I think is so important to discussion that is missing in most places is the MSLs, clinical specialists, field medical. You keep telling them, do this, do this, do this. They put all this information in. It could be a black hole. They don't know. They're not part of the discussion. And yes, it's time consuming to have all the MSLs, all the clinical specialists join these field insight review meetings, but it is so impactful. They're the ones that know the information. So any follow-up questions, any additional information that's needed, guess what? You have the subject matter expert, you have the person that got this information, or the people, they can answer those questions. And then they see the value. Oh, the chief scientific officer is on, the chief medical officer is on, someone from commercial. They see the value of bringing all these observations, data points, and then the insights that result. And then what happens with them? It's going to be easy for them to go out the next month like, yeah, I'm going to get even more. I know how to do this now. I see the discussion that's going on. So I'm not just going to go ask this question, get this information. They see the whole picture. So then they know how to better bring valuable observations or data points into the system.
Love it. And did you say commercial and other functions are in those FIR meetings?
Yeah. Yep. In the firm meetings. Yeah. We'll have, so more of the strategic leads, right? People that are someone that like the brand lead will have the brand leads, on these calls. We'll have HOR, medical information, medical directors, competitive intelligence, because again, all this information that we're bringing and creating insights with, it's valuable to the rest of the company. And if we don't share that with them, what are they going to do with it? If we don't get their input and their feedback, we're not going to know what they need, what they want, what needs to change, right? You have to get your stakeholders' feedback in order to change, modify, go back and fix anything. Or they might say, you know what? Yeah, that's good. That's all the information we need. We can close this one out. We're done with that. Or, you know what? That's really good. We need another 75 people. We need information from more people. So you have to have that discussion. You have to have the right people at the table.
Love it. Well, let's close out. There's so many things we talked about today. Where does somebody start? If you could say, these are the top 3 most important things that, without buying a new technology, without spending $1 million, like 3 things you must do if you want your program to be effective. Probably we talked about them, but let's summarize it for everybody here.
Yeah, that's a good question. It really depends on where you're at in that process, right? I mean, like I was saying, half the people didn't even have someone over the insights process. If that's you got to have someone that's over the insights process, right? So that's the very, very basic. You have to have someone over that process. You have to have the right strategic framework for that process, right? So let's say that you have those 2 pieces. You have someone over insights, you have the strategic framework. I think that the 3 things that are really, really important, we just talked about one of them. You have to have the right people involved in each part of the process. It's complex. You have different people involved in different parts of the process, but you have to have the right people. It's making sure that we're presenting the insights to the right people. Everyone does it differently, but in my experience, again, you can't just send it out, right? You have to have that discussion. And I think another thing is feedback and reassessment. You have to ask those people that are at that fund meeting, the people that are hearing your insight, what's working, what's not working, what else? What do you think about this? Is this meeting too long? Is it too short? Do I need to do it more frequently, less frequently? You have to get feedback. If it's not valuable to them, guess what? They're not going to come. They're not going to show up, right? Just like they wouldn't read a document, they're not going to show up. You have to get that feedback, and you have to get the feedback for the MSLs too, right? So just 360 feedback from everybody, reassess and change what you need to change. And then like we talked about before, the third one, follow up and show the results and impact of the insight. You have to follow up and you have to be able to show the impact. It breaks my heart, Scott, how many people I talk to, they go through 90% of the process, right? All the time, all the effort, all the money, and then it just dies at the presentation. Or even if they discuss it, no one follows up. They never get value, or they never get credit for the insights that they're bringing to the table. So don't stop at 90%, follow up and make sure leaders are showing the results and the impact of your insight.
Brent, another amazing conversation. I think we hit some of the toughest questions and insights right now. For anybody who needed some more of the basics, take a look at some of our other content. This is for kind of the master class here on insights. Good job. Loved it. Anything else to leave us with, Brent?
This was great. It was fun for me, Scott. Thank you so much. And thank you for everything that you do, that your company does. Obviously, we love working with you guys, and just a plug for MAPS. If you're not part of MAPS, join MAPS. So many resources. It's a great society as well. So thank you, Scott. Appreciate the time. Great talking to you like always. Love it. Take care.
Great. Talk to you later, Brent.